might as well kick things off. And as always, we have this recorded, so we'll put it up on our YouTube page. And anybody who wasn't able to join, will make sure that they get a copy of the recording. But as always, we appreciate you all taking the time to meet with us today and join our second Roomvo University webinar of the year. We know that you guys have super busy days and super busy lives, and we appreciate you taking some time to join us this afternoon. As always, like to kind of just start things off with a little bit of housekeeping, some updates on the Roomvo side. And I just wanted to put a spotlight on Roomvo's CRM. So we launched our CRM last year. It is a free tool for all flooring retailers. Whether you use any tool of Roomvo, you have access to use the CRM today. CRM is a great tool for managing and tracking your leads, checking out samples, and sending email reminders to your customers to encourage them to bring those samples back. If you don't have the sample in the showroom, it's really difficult to be able to sell that product. And so, as I mentioned, the CRM is entirely free. If you're on the call, you have access to the CRM. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't used it before, I encourage you to reach out to me following the webinar. I'd love to set up time with you to walk you through how to use it, set up training for your team so that you can start leveraging it in your showrooms and being able to stay more on top of your leads. With that, I'd love to introduce my co-host today, the incredible Jim Armstrong, founder and president of Flooring Success Systems, an internationally recognized coach and trainer. Jim has been helping flooring dealers across the US and Canada grow their businesses since 2007. His proven approach has empowered thousands of retailers to attract more customers, increase profitability, and compete effectively against big box stores. Over the past year, a lot of flooring dealers have actually found themselves in a tough spot. 2025 was flat, margins were maybe tight, and sales were kind of all over the place. And now, as we look ahead, there's still a great deal of uncertainty about what 2026 will bring. For many business owners, the concern isn't just the market per se, but it's the possibility of repeating the same patterns and getting the same results over and over again. Because the reality is markets do go up and down, but dealers who consistently grow, regardless of market conditions, tend to have one thing in common: strong, intentional leadership. And that's exactly what we're going to focus on during today's webinar. Our guest, Scott Humphrey, CEO of the World Floor Covering Association and author of the new book, Leadership by the Letter, is here to join us, and we're super excited to have him with us this afternoon. With decades of experience in the flooring and home improvement sectors, Scott has built a reputation as a strategic leader focused on education, innovation, and business growth. Under his leadership, the WFCA has expanded its programs, its partnerships, and resources to help members navigate an evolving marketplace while staying competitive. During today's webinar, we plan to break down what leadership really looks like in today's market and how all of you that have joined us today can use this to create momentum in your business, both now and for the long term. So Scott, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. So before we jump into the questions, I have an announcement that Scott may not have realized, but it's Scott and I's 10th anniversary.
Is that right?
Yes, it is. You came on the first webinar 10
Wow.
years ago. Yeah, 2016. I saw it as I was looking through at all the people who registered today. So
Isn't that funny? And we haven't aged at all.
none,
It's
zero,
amazing.
zero. I know. Aren't Zoom filters amazing? Got a copy of Scott's book here, which we're going to dive into.
Thank you.
And it's excellent. I'm about 10 chapters in, and I'll let Scott, of course, is going to talk about it, but I am so happy for, over the last 10 years, Scott, I mean, how many webinars have we done? And
Quite a few.
yeah, so anyway, very glad to have you here.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. It's always an honor to be asked back. That's probably more important than being asked the first time if they have you back. So it's great. And you guys always ask really good questions, and you allow me to talk to people where they live. And that's what matters to me. I don't really focus just on leadership skills that impact their job. It's more what impacts their life.
Completely agree. Love meeting people where they are. And like Jim said, we're incredibly excited to have you here today. So maybe just to kind of kick things off with a little background, just for maybe some people in the audience who may not be as familiar with you and your journey in the industry, can you kind of walk us through what your journey was like in the flooring industry and how your leadership role has evolved over time?
Sure, Reid. So a lot of you know this, but I am an example that once you're in the flooring industry, you can't get out. My dad was with the Corps of Engineers. We moved to North Georgia so he could help build a dam, Carter's Dam, over in Murray County. And at that time, the flooring industry was taking off. There were more millionaires per capita in Dalton, Georgia than anywhere in the world. So he left the Corps
Wow.
of Engineers, took all of his money out of retirement, and opened a carpet mill called HRH Rugs. So at 7 years old, I began working in a carpet mill after work, after school every day, and then during the summers, because Dad thought child labor law meant you were supposed to work your kids. I guess. Anyway, he got a lot for very little. Let's just say that. But uh, I came back to it really never thinking I would. I think like a lot of people, I said I'll never do that. But I went to school. I got a degree in vocal performance and church music. I did that for a couple of years and realized that that wasn't a calling for me. And so I did the one thing I knew. I'd spent my whole life in the flooring industry. So I went and interviewed with Shaw Industries. In 1988, they hired me as a sales rep in Hagerstown, Maryland, covering, portions of 4 states. And a year and a half later, they brought me back to hire all the salespeople. So for about 7 years at Shaw, I was responsible for all sales recruiting. Went around to major college campuses all across the United States. Transitioned from that into training and then into leadership development. And then eventually I left Shaw after 25 years. My last job was running the Shaw Flooring Network. Since then, WFCA, they called me in 2012. The interviewing process was pretty extensive, but I came on board in March of 2013.
I've heard you speak on leadership a number of times. It's something that you're passionate about.
Very
I,
much so.
you've been on even some of the webinars we've done have been around that topic. At what point did leadership become something you were intentional about mastering and not just doing?
I think my first interest in leadership, Jim, came very early. We grew up, Dad's business never took off, so we grew up pretty poor. We didn't have much. I grew up in a 10-foot wide trailer until I was 12 years old. And but even though we lived in a 10-foot wide trailer with a Naugahyde couch, um, there was a picture of the Vice President of the United States over our couch because he was my cousin, Hubert Humphrey, at that time.
Wow.
And so I grew up knowing that people in certain positions had the opportunity to have a greater impact. And then when I came to my faith in my early teen years, I began to realize the power of combining those two. Faith feeds the spiritual side, but so many of the lessons I learned in the Bible were just logical lessons that if somebody else had said them, nobody would push back. And I thought those principles could impact everyone's life. And so, if I'm speaking to a church, I might bring scripture into it, but the principle is not wrong, whether you believe in scripture or not, to treat other people the way you want to be treated. There's so many logical, good leadership points in there. And at that point, I realized I could do this and have an impact on people's lives, which has always been my passion. I want to impact people where they live.
Is there one leader in your experience maybe that you either worked with or just knew of or came across that you would say had more of a profound impact on you in your career and kind of directed you to this point?
Yeah, certainly Reid. His name was Ron Moore. I was not really brought up in church, and Ron found out that I was a singer, that I was a vocalist. And so when he came to this church in our small community, he sought me out. He came and knocked on the door and asked if I could come to the youth choir. And my dad slammed the door in his face and said, "My son plays baseball." That story has never been forgotten because Ron went on to be like a father to me. And
Mm.
he taught me some really valuable lessons. If you don't mind, I'll share one of those right now because
Yeah.
I, I remember one year when I was planning for a youth camp, we had about 150 kids going to youth camp. And if you can imagine in middle school and high school how important it is that you room with the right people, the people you want to be with. So I know that I have to have the rooming list finished that day. Earlier in the summer, I've met a guy by the name of Greg who had some learning disabilities, and we formed this friendship. And Greg created the habit of coming by every day at 1 o'clock. And this day, I knew I didn't have time for it. I was too busy. I had to get the rooming list done. So I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? So I decided I wouldn't look up. When he came in the room, I wasn't going to look up and he would get the hint and he would leave. And so I felt him come into the room around 1 o'clock and I kept my head down and felt I'd had it down an ample amount of time that he would have left, but he didn't leave. And I looked up and I said, Greg, I'm too busy today, man. Maybe you can come back another time and we can chat. And he didn't have to tell me I devastated him. It was obvious by his demeanor when he walked out the door. And he left the room. My office was very close to Ron's because he was the full-time youth minister and I was just a summer intern. And Greg had barely left, and I get a phone call from Ron. And I said, hey, Ron, what's going on? He said, hey, have you got a minute? And I said, sure. I said, come on in. And he came in, and I said, what can I do for you? He said, I'm just wondering how it is that you have time for me, but you didn't have time for Greg. And he said this statement, I've never forgotten it. People are always more important than things. People are always more important than processes. Whenever you have time to impact a person's life, everything else gets set aside. And that's why Ron is that type of leader to me. He literally took me under his wing and taught me things I probably wouldn't have learned otherwise. And it's really shaped the direction of my life.
That's awesome. It's those leaders, those mentors that have like, yeah, such a profound impact on your life. You never forget, and you try and like hope to be able to pass those on
Yeah.
to others that you mentor and look up to you. So very cool.
Thanks.
Um, I know we talked about your book kind of briefly. We plan to kind of dive into it a little bit more throughout the webinar. Can you
Sure.
share with us what inspired you to write Leadership by the Letter?
Yeah, I think there were two things, Reid. The first one was the knowledge that when you leave after making a presentation, you take the information with you. And so often they'll retain about 10, 15% of it, but you don't have the impact you could have otherwise. I wanted something to leave behind that they could refer back to if they remembered that guy that spoke. And we enjoyed his speech, wonder what he talked about. They would be able to look back and see the things that I'm passionate about. But I think the catalyst that made me actually write the book, because I hate writing. I love having written, but I hate writing. And I got tired of seeing all these leadership gurus that were coming up with their own formula of leadership that made leadership look difficult. When I think leadership in its basic premise is very simple. We complicate it. It's common sense. It's just not common practice. And so I wanted to put something together that simplified what was out there. And I thought, what's the simplest thing? What's something we all know? The alphabet, right? There's 26 letters. I thought, okay, if I come up with two words, two qualities for each letter, that's 52. There's 52 weeks in a year. It's a great way for people to spend their year focusing on one trait a week, not one every day, one a week. And so the way I recommend people read the book is to read it through. It really is a good book because I write like I read. I want short chapters and I want a lot of stories. And so that's what you'll find there. But I would encourage you to read it through. You'll do it in a day and then go back and spend a week focused on each chapter. Like attitude is chapter 1. Spend a week where your whole week is focused on how can I improve my attitude? How can I choose my attitude each day? And so that was my goal, was to tell people that this doesn't have to be daunting. It doesn't have to be something that you try for a couple of weeks and you just can't keep up with it. These are basic principles. They're common sense. And I wanted people to be able to embrace them.
So one of the big things that we're seeing right now, and I've been talking about this in webinars this year and last year and articles and conversations, is how flat and uncertain 2025 was. And a lot of people are concerned about 2026 being a repeat of that. A lot of it kind of has been already. Why do you think so many business owners end up repeating the same results year after year?
I go back to human nature, Jim. When we're afraid, what do? We hunker down. And so the tendency is that you don't change during times of crisis, you repeat. And you repeat exactly what wasn't working the year before. You just do more of it. You do it faster, you work harder at it, you do it longer, but you're not really embracing anything different. And the need to utilize the tools around you, like Roomvo and what they have available. There's so much this industry offers that people aren't tapping into. and they wonder why they're the same place they were. It's because here's what happens. It's really simple. We don't think about it this way, but we do something and it works. And then we do it again and it works again. And we begin to convince ourselves that is the way to do it. When in reality, it's a way to do it. And if you don't create the next change, you're going to be spending the rest of your life adapting to someone else's change that's been forced on you. So if you have the option, doesn't it make more sense to be the creator of the change than the reactor to the change? I read a book years ago by Alan Dutchman. It was actually a story I read in a magazine called oh God, Fast Company. It's a business magazine that basically challenges business premises. And Alan had done this article called Change or Die. And when I saw it, I was walking through the airport and I was speaking a lot on change. It's the reason most people don't embrace leadership or anything different in their life is because change is uncomfortable and more uncomfortable as we get older. And so I saw that article and I thought, this is great. It's a business magazine. It's going to be about businesses that don't change, die. I thought I'd have some good material I could use for my next presentation. But when I opened it up, it wasn't about business at all. It was about people. See, they'd taken 2,000 people that had open heart surgery and told them if they didn't change their lifestyle, they would die. They
Wow.
would not make it to the next one. And within 2 years, 90% were back living the lifestyle that caused them to have open heart surgery. And so Alan Dorsman took that article and wrote this fantastic book on why change is difficult. And it's called Change or Die. We've got to begin to embrace when you feel stuck, there's a reason for that. You're stuck. When you feel like you're just treading water, it's because you're just treading water. If you want something different, you got to do something different. You can live in the same space, but utilize a tool that's available to you that you haven't used before. Call a retailer who's been doing it right. Somebody succeeds during every downturn. Why not you? And I would tell you this, y'all were talking about flat in 25. I would tell you, if you were flat, you were up. Flat would be a good year for 2025. Most
Yeah.
people were down anywhere from 8 to 12%. And so uh, you can't expect a different result when you do the same thing over and over and over again.
You said a couple of things there. One is, essentially not letting external factors dictate your fate. And
Yeah,
that's tough to do when the economy, that's a pretty big factor. It's absolutely beyond your control to impact the economy. But there are always things you can do to mitigate that. And
yeah.
and I guess I would just encourage anybody who's facing that to one, read your book, but two, take these. I love the idea of just taking action. Um, and
Do
smart,
something.
yes, exactly. Something different. I was learning to fly fish, certain kind of fly fishing back in 2014, and the guy that was teaching me, if we weren't catching fish, he'd say change something. It does, go walk 100 yards up or downstream, just change something because what you're doing now isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you think about COVID, Reed, it impacted your life. It changed your destination ultimately. During COVID, Jim, I think you know Don Roberts as well, but dear friend of mine who owns several stores in Alabama, a lot of people just hunkered down. A lot of people just locked up and said, well, we can't do anything. Don brought all of his salespeople together and said, listen, these stores, these locations, these commercial establishments are going to be closed. This is a great time for people to replace their flooring. And he put all the salesmen on the phone. He didn't have a down month. Why? Bill Curry was coach at Georgia Tech and Alabama and Kentucky, and I had a chance to speak with him. We had him speak at one of our SFN conferences, and I'm having lunch with him. And I said, "What's the mindset that really changes things?" And he said, "It's the mindset that says it's possible." I said, "Give me an example." He said, "Somebody's going to succeed during the downturn. Why not you?" So years later, one of our vendor partners with the SFM was Hunter Douglas. And so I was going around to all of our vendors. It was during '08, '09 when everything was really tight, the Great Recession. And I was asking them, how are you dealing with this situation? How are you dealing with how are you dealing with the Great Recession? And the response was, oh, we've chosen not to take part in it. And
Yes.
I said, what? They said, yeah, our CEO talked to us yesterday and we decided we're not going to take part in it this year. Why? Because the mindset you have, if you get up every day and think it's going to be tough, you're probably going to be right. I would rather be wrong. I'd rather think it's going to be great and it not be great every day than to believe it's going to be bad every day and be right. So you've got to change your mindset. And then you've got, like, as you said, Jim, don't just take an action, take a different action. If you know what happened before didn't work, why repeat it? Why do it faster? Do something different.
When I started working with floor dealers right before in 2007, right before the bomb went off, and I had uh, so many dealers that I worked with actually set record years and scooped up market share left behind by failed competitors. And it's because they were doing things differently. They took a different approach, and they had the uh, you know, courage to say, yeah, this makes me really uncomfortable. I am not used to doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah. I think that the other thing you got to think about is if you hunker down during a downtime, at my age, getting down is not an issue. Getting back up can be. Right. So the more you hunker down and the more you lock your body into that position, the harder it is when it's time to get up. Warren Buffett, I had the privilege of interviewing him several times when I was at Shaw after he purchased the Shaw entity. And he said more businesses fail in the upturn than they do in the downturn
Mm,
because they're not prepared for success. All those muscles have atrophied because you've been hunkering down all that time. Be
yeah.
prepared for success. And when possible, create the success yourself. Make it happen.
So in your book, you break leadership down into really simple and practical concepts. You mention, um, you know, you can go through it in the entire year, focus on one piece every week. Why is simplicity so important when it comes to leading a business and being successful?
I honestly, Reid, I think simplicity is important in life. I don't think it has anything to do with business. I think people want you to help simplify their life. My word for 2026 is simplify. I've told my staff here, if you can make it easier for people to join the WFCA, guess what? They're going to. We got to look at what's difficult for them and find ways that we can simplify it. You want more customers buying from you than your competition? It's not your price. It's how difficult the buying process is. Make it easy for them to buy from you. Simplicity is everything. That's the golden rule these days. People want you to simplify their life. If you can find a way to do that, you will succeed. So as a parent, if you can simplify your kids' lives, don't have 3 jillion rules for them. Have 3 major rules and give them some leeway so that they can begin to manage their own life. You're going to find out they'll obey more. I remember a story of a lady who was married to this guy in the military, and then he had this list of things she had to do every day. And she hated it. And she hated it, but she did it every day and she hated it. And finally, she just had enough and they divorced. And years later, she remarried. And one night she was up in the attic and she found that list. And she was doing all the things that were on that list, but not because she had to, but
Mm,
because she loved the person she was doing it for.
uh,
Your motivation is to do the right thing. And I think simplifying anyone's life, even if you simply look at the matter of time, what do we not have enough of?
time.
As a parent of triplets and a boy, I can tell you I wish I had had more time with my kids. But if I can help provide more time for you to have with your kids, that's success. And you want it as much as I do. We got to begin to ask ourselves, what are they really after? And get out of this mindset that there's one way to sell, there's one way to be the preferred choice. People want different things, and you have to adapt what you're doing to the people you're selling to.
So, in applying these leadership principles, what are some of the principles from the book that leaders can implement immediately and start seeing results?
The first one is the first word I use, and that's attitude. It's the one thing you get to choose every day. Years ago, and Jim, I'm sure I've shared this story with you before, but my son was 4 years old, and we had gone into a department store to buy something for his mom for Mother's Day, and we had no idea what we were looking for. And so we're walking around. I said, son, we're going to have to ask someone for help. I said, oh, there's somebody. And look over, and there's a lady across the way. And as I walk to get her, my son grabs my arm, pulls me back, and he says, not her, Daddy. And I said, do we know her? He said, no, but she's got a no face. I've never forgotten it. And you'll probably never forget it now. The people you interact with, I watch people on TV on shows and immediately, like last night, I was watching a cooking show and I said, that lady's got a no face. If your face says, I'm doing this because it's my job and not because I want to help you, that's a no face. I want to be a yes face. I want people to approach me because they think I can make a difference in their life and in their business. And that's your choice. You determine how you're going to present yourself to the world. Attitude is the one thing you get to choose every day. The other thing I would tell you is so important, and we touched on it already, is this ability to embrace change. And it is tough. And it is tougher the further we go because we get kind of in these ruts, right? We get in, psychologists say a rut is just a grave with both ends kicked out. People still die there. They just do it going back and forth and they don't realize that they're dying. It's the people that drive to work the same way every day, hang out with the same friends every weekend, shop at the same grocery store, get gas at the same gas station. There's so much more out there. And your job as a leader is to first to have the courage yourself to peer outside the rut, but then to challenge your people to do the same. They are looking at you. They're following your vision. So if you have the courage to do something different when everybody around you isn't, it's very likely they will too. And so change is something that we've got to be willing to embrace, to not see as a negative, but to see it as a necessity. Because again, you're either going to create the change or you will spend the rest of your life responding to someone else's. And so change, attitude, zeal's the last word because again, you choose to act, to do something. People that are depressed, what's the first thing they do? They shut out the world. I've struggled with this, Jim. I think you've struggled with it a little bit. I've been in those moments. I just didn't want anyone else out there because I felt like I was going to fail them or I was going to be disappointed. So what we do, we shut ourselves down and we quit doing and we atrophy in place. Nobody gets better doing that. You've got to be willing to get out and do something in your personal life, in your professional life, in your physical life, in your spiritual life. There's so many things you can do that really make a difference. And change doesn't have to be difficult. I know I'm rambling on this one, but it's probably the biggest one. I've got another book that should be out this fall. And the title of that book is Commercial Breaks, Changing Your Life and Your World During the Idle Time. And it's based around something I began doing about 8 years ago. I heard a story of Sam Mervos. Sam was a strength coach at the University of Georgia. And Sam, long before most people had strength coaches, this is in the late 70s, one day a couple of the football players came in from a psych class and they had been studying how TV might be detrimental to kids. And so they go to Sam, they say, Sam, you got two kids. What are they, 8 and 10? He said, yeah. He said, how much TV do you let them watch? He said, I'll let them watch all they want. They said, oh, Sam, you can't do that. We've been studying it and it can be really bad for them. It can even shrink their brain, which is one of the things amazingly that they thought at the time. And he said, guys, don't worry. He said, I'll let them watch as much TV as they want, as long as during every commercial break, they get down and do push-ups. And if they're willing to do push-ups, I'm willing to let them watch TV. Well, the players thought maybe he was just messing with them, so they went off. But a couple weeks later, Sam had his two boys in working out with these guys in the field house, and they remembered the story. And so they challenged this 8 and 10-year-old to a push-up competition. Now, this is an 8 and 10-year-old battling the most in shape bodies in college sport. And they're dropping out at 30 and 40, and this 8 and 10-year-old are still going at 60, 70, and 80 push-ups.
Wow.
Now, don't miss the point, because when you hear that, you forget that I said they only did push-ups during the commercial breaks. What are the commercial breaks in your life that you're not using to make a positive difference? So I shared that story for years, Jim, and then finally someone came up to me and said, well, what do you do? And I said, I tell the story. And they said, no, what do you do? I said, I haven't done that myself, but I went home and I saw something on Facebook about 21 veterans attempt suicide every day. And would you do the 21 challenge? And so I couldn't do 21 at first. I could maybe do 5, and I worked my way up to 21, and then 21 got easy, and I was 55 that year, and I thought, I'm gonna do my age every day. And so I got to where I could do 55 a day. And then 55 wasn't hard anymore. And so I moved it to 100. And then that wasn't hard anymore. And I got to where I was doing on average 400 or 500 push-ups a day. Only during the commercial breaks. Research says that we have 18 commercial breaks on average in our life every day. That's a 3 to 5 minute period that you don't have anything you have to do. And so in the last 8 years, I have done over 1 million push-ups
Wow.
only during commercial breaks. Now, I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm saying it to inspire you that there is time in your life to make change that you're probably not using. And then I realized I don't want to be known for the guy that did all the push-ups. What else can I do during my commercial breaks? And so I'll leave a text just thinking about you. I'll write a handwritten note, which, by the way, may be one of the most valuable ways of communicating ever, especially now with all the technology, and send it to someone and say, just thinking about you, I appreciate the impact you've had on my life. In fact, if you want to do an experiment, all of you that are listening, just take your phone out and the last 5 people you've talked to say, send a message back and say, I appreciate you. You will be shocked at the responses that you get back because people don't hear that. I was walking with my girlfriend yesterday in a grocery store and we were buying some stuff, and this lady said, I love your sweater and you are a pretty lady. And I'm telling you that because most people are very prone to tell you what they don't like. I think we ought to tell more people what we do like. And that compliment will ring in her ears for weeks. There's so much we could do to change our lives and our world during the idle time that wouldn't have to change all the things you already have going on. And so I want to challenge you to look at change not as something that's overwhelming, but as something that's doable during the idle time.
And speaking of challenges, can you think of an example of a time when following your own principles was maybe difficult but totally necessary?
Yes, probably one of the biggest decisions I made that changed the course of my life was when I left Shaw. I loved my time at Shaw Industries. I was there 25 years. I had a phenomenal team when I left, but in 2012, I was asked to serve on the nominating committee for the WSCA from Shaw. And they wanted more Shaw people to be on their board. And so I went and I met Chris Davis, who was the previous leader of the WSCA, and we formed a good relationship and we talked about ways we were going to work together. I'm driving down the road probably 2 months after that, and I hear somebody crying on the radio. Now in Dalton, we have a talk radio, or did at the time, where they talked about the industry. And it was the current chairman of the board for the WSCA saying that Chris Davis had suddenly passed away. And I didn't think much of it. In fall of that year, I got a message from two dear friends that I trusted, people whose voice mattered to me. And they said, hey, we're trying to find someone to run the WSCA. And I said, well, I don't know of anybody. I said, but I'll keep my ear to the ground. And they said, no, we were thinking about you. And I said, you have got to be kidding. I said, I've got the job of my life. I'm running the Shaw Flooring Network. We have this gigantic party every other year down at Universal where we rent the whole park for ourselves. I love what I'm doing. I'm well compensated where I am. I'm not interested. But because I like these two guys, they said, well, would you just look at the job description? And honestly, to get them off the phone, I said, yeah, just send it to me. Now, I was turning 50 that year, so I had made a list. I'm a list person, so I made a list of 10 things I wanted to accomplish professionally before I retired. And when I got their list in, 9 of my 10 were on the front page. And I said, God, I don't know what you're doing. Maybe you just want to humble me. They're not going to hire me. I've never been a CEO, but I'm willing to follow this. And I went through the process. I took the risk. I wasn't stuck where I was, which was the comfortable place. And I can tell you, were there times I second guessed it? You bet. But I've never looked back wanting the job. I've looked back wanting the people. I love the people I worked with. And ironically for me, many of them now work for me here at the WSCA, which is a great compliment because if I had been bad to them there, they wouldn't have followed me here. Quick story. We talked about the Masters earlier. I'm at the Masters, golly, 12 years ago. They had a program going where you could bring your child if they were under 16, even if they didn't have a pass. So I told y'all my dad has these two passes. And so My dad and I are there, and my son Christian is with me. And we get there a little bit late. We want to see that tee off on the first day. At that time, it was Arnold Palmer, Gary Player, and Jack Nicklaus, and we're going to miss it. And ESPN sees us from the side, and they walk up to us and they said, "Are y'all here because of the new program where they're letting kids come in to learn and love the sport?" And I said, "Yes, we are." And they walked us up to the front, let us see exactly what was going on. And I remember from that experience that you can make someone's life different by a very small act. We were stuck. We weren't going anywhere. But we finally got in. There's one hole, hole number 6, where you tee off here, the green's up here, but it's a real lull down between. So people sit in that lull and they watch the ball fly over their head. So I'm sitting there with my probably at that time 9-year-old son. And this guy walks up to me and he goes, "Are you Scott Humphrey?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I just want you to know, I heard you speak a while back, and something you said literally changed my life. And I just want you to know how much that means to me." I get emotional now thinking about that, but what I'm really emotional about is if my life had not been consistent, what might that guy have said in front of my son? What would I have been hoping wouldn't come out of his mouth? And I think as leaders, we've got to embrace these principles. We're really good at talking about wanting everybody to move out of their rut, but we've got to be the one that sets the example. And when that happens, if somebody walks up to you, you won't be fearing what they're going to say. So I challenge you to embrace these things and actually act on them. Don't be inspired by what I say. Be inspired by what you do.
You said something earlier about getting out of the rut and trying new things, and that I heard somebody, and I can't remember who it was, saying it's being willing to suck at something and be okay with it. If you're gonna do something new, you're gonna be lousy at it at first.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's not fun in the beginning, oftentimes. I've had to reinvent more times than I wanted to. It's like a bird getting kicked out of the nest, it seems like.
Jim. Every great person has. I love documentaries. I'm doing my leadership live on Fridays on American legacy. So I'm looking back at the people who shaped our country. Ben Franklin failed out of school in the 10th grade because he couldn't pass algebra. And
Yeah.
he had as much of an impact on the founding of our nation as anyone, but it was because he knew there was more in him than the channel they were trying to drive him to. And so you're right, you've got to be willing to fail. Now, here's the difference. Zig Ziglar says that failure is an event, it's not a person, which means failure only becomes a person if you choose to live there. And the statement you'll hear me say, and you'll read it throughout the book, the past is a great place to learn. It's a terrible place to live. And I know a lot of people that live back there. You ever go to a reunion, you'll meet Joe, what's his name, who caught that pass in the football game, and he's still talking about it. You know why? He hasn't done anything memorable since.
You peaked.
He's stuck. He's stuck back there. And so I want people talking about not only what I'm doing now, but my vision for the future. I want them to be. I was reading my devotion this morning, and the gentleman was talking about the fact it's the guy that founded Hobby Lobby, and he said, we talk about legacy as something that we leave behind. He said, I don't want to see that way. He said, I see legacy as something that's currently in motion.
Mm.
I'm doing it now, and hopefully it will have an impact far beyond me. But I don't wait for my legacy to kick in once I'm gone. I want to do things now that are memorable enough that people follow them, that they mock them, that they imitate them.
Something that you mentioned that resonates a lot with me a little earlier was it's really all about the people. And you mentioned some people that you had worked with in your previous role. You have the pleasure of working with them today. It really does make all the difference. Yeah, I think about that a lot. The people that I get to work with are amazing. The Roomvo team, the Q Floors team, it's been a crazy year. And how important it is to be surrounded with really great people. But that makes me think about everyone that we have in the audience, all of these amazing flooring retailers. How would you say, how does strong leadership directly impact team performance specific to a flooring business, for example?
Yeah. Let me first say this, Reid. I knew that about you before you just said it, because when I asked you how the transition was going, you didn't talk about processes. You talked about the people. You're in what you're in. Most of us stay where we're at because of the people. We also leave where we're at because of our boss. Leadership has such a dramatic impact. And so, I mean, we had a great example this year with the Winter Olympics and the hockey win, the ice hockey win. So think about this. In 1960 was the last time that the United States beat Russia and won the gold medal before 1980, the Miracle on Ice. The last player cut from the 1960 team was Herb Brooks, who became the coach of the 1980 team. When Herb Brooks decided to coach the team, he said, I'm not going to do it the way we've always done it. We've always played their game and tried to beat them. He said, I'm going to get in better shape than they are and make them keep up with us. But Herb had this really unique challenge. He was coaching the best college players, non-professionals, right? Amateurs in the world. These are the same players that hate each other because they played against each other collegiately. So he has to get them to come together. So there is a scene in Miracle on Ice where he has them skating after a game. They tied the Norwegian team 1-1, and they're happy about it, and he's not. And so they're in Norway, and he won't leave the ice rink. They turn the lights off. He still won't rink. He has them basically doing our equivalent of blood and guts on ice skates. And at the end of it, he asked them, who do you play for? And they were all going, well, I'm Jim Craig. I play for University of Minnesota, da, 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 da. And finally, they're doing this. Even the team doctor has stepped in and said, Herb, you got to stop these kids. Their hearts can't take this. And Michael Ruzioni, who became the captain of the team, scored the amazing winning goal in 1980. Ruzioni stepped up and he said, Michael Ruzioni, I play for the United States of America. Drop the mic. It was over. Now, here's the amazing thing. If you want to know how important leadership and coaching is, after 1980, we decided to let professionals play. We didn't win again until this year. Why? Because you had the best players in the world, but they weren't on the same team. They were out there for their game, not to win the game. So the coach has to have the ability to go in and unify the team and help them to catch the unified vision. Herb Brooks had to convince them that they were playing for America and not for themselves. And I'll close that story with this. At the very end of the movie, I don't know if I'd noticed it before, but I watched it again recently, and they're talking about the fact that Herb Brooks obviously served as a consultant on the movie, but he died before the movie ever aired. In the very last line, on the very last tip of the screen, after you've watched all the follow-up, is Herb Brooks never saw this movie. He lived it. What movie are you living? Whose dream are you living? Because if you're not living your dream, you're living somebody else's. And I challenge you to get out of the rut because that's the only place you'll find your dream. Dreams don't live in ruts, but you have more in you than you realize you have. There's more potential. You're created for something much better. And I'm not trying to do some motivational thing. I'm just telling you that's it. You were not created for mediocrity. You're created for greatness. So why would you settle? Why would you settle for mediocrity? I challenge you, look at the things you're doing in your life and put a list down and then say, does it matter or does it not? Is it impacting others or is it not? Is it impacting the future where I'm going or is it not? Take the knots out of your life and focus on the areas where you're making a difference. That's what coaching does. It evaluates the skills of each person and applies the pressure where it needs to be applied. I want to do a quick commercial here. And Michelle, I'm hoping you're still on here. Michelle Nix is our Director of Education for the WSCA. She will be doing a growth session tomorrow on the DISC profile. And she is sending out to everybody ahead of time the opportunity to take the DISC profile for free. And then for the next 3 months, she's going to take you through the DISC. Now, the DISC helps you understand yourself, but where I find great value in it is it helps you understand those you work with and interact with. It tells you how to read people so that when I see people walk in the door, within about 2 minutes, I can tell you if they're a D, which is a very driven person, or they're an I, which is the life of the party, or they're an S, which is a very steady, stable person, or they're a C, which is conscientious and likes to kind of be by themselves. Once I do that, I don't identify them, categorize them. I identify my audience so I can better communicate to them because I communicate the way they receive it, not the way I like to give it. Another great book for that is The 5 Love Languages. If you understand you love to be treated certain ways, but your tendency is to give love the same way you receive it. But what if that's not your significant other's love language? So what if their love language is quality time and yours is words of affirmation? And so you love words of affirmation, so you praise her all the time, but that's really not doing anything. You've got to find out. So there is a version of the book called The Five Love Languages for the Workplace. Be willing to understand your people, but first of all, you must be willing to understand yourself. You've got to be willing to look at who you are, change what you can if it's not beneficial, and then be honest about your flaws and your faults and your failures. People want to know you're human. They don't want to follow robots. This AI technology is fantastic. There are certain things it's good for, but you'll never humanize a robot. People want to follow someone who's had the same challenges they have, who's faced the same fears that they have, who's jumped out of an airplane, Jim, because that's one of their dreams. Even though they may never do it, knowing somebody else who has gives them the willingness to embrace you and to hear what you have to say. We've got to be willing to understand ourselves and also to understand others. That seminar is tomorrow at 2 o'clock will be the first one, and we'll be recording it. So if you're not able to get on, but Michelle, I hope I didn't look, but I'm hoping you put that in the chat.
Michelle's
Okay.
going to send
I
it
see
to
where
me
you've
and I'll make
asked.
sure that it gets out.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. Sorry
Of
for the
course.
commercial.
Oh, that's fantastic, and I'm going to take advantage of that. The A lot of dealers struggle with building and keeping a strong team, and what does, we think about leaders in leadership in terms of leading, you know, telling people what you need done, directing, but what part does it play in attracting, developing, and retaining great people?
It's funny you ask that question, Jim, because I'm talking to the captain. You get this. You read people really well, and you understand there's a couple of things you got to do. One, you always have to be recruiting. You
Mhm.
don't recruit when you have an opening. You recruit every day of your life. Listen, if I'm going through the drive-through and somebody treats me nice, pull out a business card and say, you know what, I'm impressed with you. I don't have anything right now, but if you're interested, I'd like to be able to reach out to you. Would you put your number on the back of this? Because
Mm,
things happen all the time. I talked to someone today who's lost every employee she has. She's running the business by herself. It's a $3.2 million business. That's a challenge. How do you do that? And sometimes you hire people and it just doesn't work out. And part of the reason is this. When I did all that recruiting at Shaw, we interviewed well over 10,000 people. We ended up hiring about 1,000. What I found out was we tend to hire people that are like us.
mhm.
Now, on the surface, that sounds great because they probably have the strengths that we like. But what we don't think about is they also have our weaknesses. Now, if we can't fix our own weaknesses, imagine managing a whole team of people that have it. That's what happens. We hire people that are not who we think they are when we hire them. The hiring process is set up so that people who need a job become what they think they have to be to get the position. Your job is to find a way to cut through that. So I'm going to give you a really quick tip. We called it SAO when I was at Shaw. Instead of asking people what they would do during an interview, ask them to tell you about a situation where they have shown a certain skill set. Tell me about a time when you won over a negative customer. Well, what I would do is, no, no, I appreciate that, but I didn't ask you what you would do. I want to know about a time when you did it. And
Mm.
they tell you about, and you say, okay, now tell me what action specifically did you take to win that customer over? So first is situation, second is action, and third is what was the outcome? Now, you know you've got a really good candidate if they tell you they think they did everything right, but they weren't able to turn the customer around. Then I simply ask the question, if you could do it again, what might you do differently? If they're honest enough to admit their failure, hire
Mm.
them because you have broken through and you're talking to the real person. You're no longer talking to the person they think they have to be hired. And so always be looking. Use a method in interviewing that cuts through the fog and ask the right questions. Find out. And finally, I would just tell you, be very honest with them up front. If there are challenges and you found that out from the last person that left when you did the exit interview, which you should always do, then say, hey, listen, the last person that was here said that they struggled with the time, that they couldn't commit the time to it. And by the way, if I were interviewing for a job, that's the first question I would ask. Why did the last person leave?
Mm.
I want to know because I may have the same challenge they do, but it's doable, guys, and they're out there, and the right people are out there. You've just got to do some things differently than what you've done in the past.
I think you just dropped a gold nugget, and it's something that I'm going to start doing because we live in a world of mediocrity. But every now and then you run into these superstars, and they might be working at the gas station or at the box store or wherever, and they just care. They just
Yeah.
invested in it. It doesn't matter that they're not trained in what you happen to need. Hire for attitude, train for aptitude. And I'm going to start doing that. That is,
Say that again, Jim. Hire for attitude, train for aptitude. That makes so much sense. So you have all these encounters every day where you interact with people. I have a habit. When I sit down to eat, I always ask the waiter or waitress what their name is. Sometimes they'll say it. Even if they say it, I ask them to repeat it again. Every time they come to the table, I use their name. And if they've done a good job at the end, I say, hey, listen, thank you. You did a good job. First of all, people need to hear that, especially in our society today, where there's so much gridlock and everybody's on one side or the other. But it also builds a relationship that makes them want to figure out what's different about you. And
mm,
so now the door's open that should I have an opening, they'll go, you're that guy. You're the one that left me with a good tip and told me I did a good job. I needed that day. Every encounter is an encounter where you can make a difference that tells people they matter.
Yeah,
yeah.
and small gestures and comments like that really do go a long way.
Mm,
So, and it takes, no time to be able to share something like that. So, that one definitely resonates with me, and I'm sure with lots of people that are joining us here today. With just 5 minutes left, we typically open up the Q&A for those that have questions, can drop them in there, whether they're for Scott, Jim, or myself. Feel free to use the Q&A, so that we can answer your questions in live time. While we do that, Scott, I think like in terms of the letters and the way that it's broken down, in your book, for me, ownership definitely resonates the most. I think
yeah.
it's really about, taking responsibility even when things aren't going well. And
Mhm.
that's really one thing that can separate good leaders from great leaders. And I
Yeah.
wonder, when you were writing this book, if you could write one more letter, what would it be?
Well, I had a lot. Here's a funny story. I had 52 chapters, and when I sent it to the publisher, there were only 51. And the word that I'd left out was something like detail. It was something that kind of went with the fact that I'd left out a word. There are numerous things. I tried to narrow it down. Attitude, change, courage, vision. All of those are words that we generally think of with leadership, but there's a lot in there as you dive deeper, like commitment, like discipline. Those are words we don't like to think about with leadership. Off the spur of my right now at the moment, I can't think of a word I didn't include. In fact, there were times where I really searched for a word that went with a certain letter, or I had trouble choosing between how many S words there are that really could make a difference, or are other things. Um, that's a good question. I'll give some thought to that and be ready for that answer next time.
Okay, you got it. In the meantime, in terms of actually being able to get your book, for those that are in the audience that want a copy, where can they buy it? What's the best way for them to get their hands on one?
Amazon's probably the best place to get it. They have some hard copies. If you want a hard copy signed, you can contact me at my email address. It's shumphrey@wfca.org. And it's $30 for a hard copy. It's just $10 for a soft copy. I'll be happy to sign it and send it to you. You can Venmo me. I'm not really worried about the money. I'm more worried about you having the book and being able to pass it on and make a difference.
What are other, is there anything else about the WFCA, any other resources or anything that you would like to talk about, Scott, before we wrap it up today?
Yeah, real quick, Jim. I've already mentioned the growth session tomorrow. Michelle is awesome. She spent well over 30 years at Shaw. I was just able to bring her in this year. She's done leadership training. They have an award-winning leadership program called SALT, the Shaw Academy for Leadership Training, which is a 3-day intensive. we are going to do our version of that called SEAL 2. So, Jim, you know about the SEAL course. It's the online program. We want a face-to-face version, and it doesn't repeat the stuff from SALT at all. It takes people from where they are and challenges their leadership acumen, what they believe, but really helps them position themselves for success through the rest of their life, no matter what point they're at. Our first SEAL 2, and probably the only one this year, is going to be October 27th through 30th. The normal cost in that's $2,100. We're going to lower the cost significantly for the first 10 people that sign up because we're going to use your testimonials. Quite frankly, we're going to use you to be the way that we get people to sign up for that course going forward. SEAL, what you're familiar with, Jim, we have another cohort coming up June 15th. We actually have probably 65 or 70 people going through right now that have already started this year. We'll have one of those per quarter, but the next one is June 15th.
How can they get information or sign up?
WFCA.org. Very simple. Everything is right there. It tells you what's going on. You also can access all of my Leadership Live, my Friday podcast. They're available there in the archives. So there's a lot of information there. Again, let me say with Roomvo and WFCA and all the other resources that are out there from all the other entities, we want your life to be simpler and we want it to be better. Use us. Use us. Don't not use us because you've never done that before. That's exactly why you should. So this is a great time. I'm asking you, and Jim's asking, and Reid's asking you to step out of the rut and do something different. Utilize what we're putting in front of you.
Absolutely. Take advantage of the resources that are out there. I shared the link for tomorrow's webinar. I shared Scott's email as well as the domain for, or the website rather, for WFCA. So that's all in the chat for everyone. As
Awesome.
always, if you have follow-up questions, you can reach out to any one of us. We truly appreciate you all taking the time to join us this afternoon, taking time out of your busy days. And yeah, we hope that you have a great rest of your day, a very successful year of business, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Fantastic.
Thank
Jim,
you,
Reid,
Scott.
thank you so
Everyone.
much. You guys are great. Thanks.